You are good to start.
It's 5 o'clock, and I welcome everyone to the Saugeen Shores Committee of Adjustment for Monday, August the 15th, 2022, and I call this meeting to order. Our second item on our agenda is any acknowledgement of any pecuniary interest. You can either bring up the interest now or at any time it appears on the agenda. The adoption of minutes is our third item. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Moved by Mr. Legault, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion about the minutes? Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? We declare the motion carried. I'm unaware of any additional business, so we shall move on to our item number 5, which is public hearings. This is 5.1. This is a minor variance application A-2022-051. Jordan Moncrief and Brendan Watson with the municipal address in the former town of Port Elgin of 827 Elgin Street. First, we'll receive a report from the planning staff. Then the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll ask them to reserve their comments on the application until we have heard from the public. Then we will hear from any members of the public. Members of the public are advised that the ability to appeal the decision on this application may be limited if you have not provided comments on the application before the decision is made. After we have heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. I will now ask Ms. Smith to present the file. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Good evening through you, Chair O'Connor. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. Okay, so I am before you this evening presenting on this minor variance application by Jordan Moncrief and Brendan Watson. And as noted earlier, the property is located in Port Elgin, specifically at 827 Elgin Street. The purpose of this application is to increase the maximum height permitted for an accessory structure from 5 meters to 5.97 meters, and to increase the maximum gross floor area permitted for an additional residential unit from 40% to 48%. Approval of this application will facilitate the construction of an additional residential unit above the existing detached garage. So this is a site plan showing the property. The building at what would be the bottom of your screen is the existing single family home. There's a driveway that extends from Elgin Street to the back of the property where there is the existing detached garage. They are looking to expand the floor area of that garage and then put the secondary dwelling unit on the second floor of that structure. This is a street view of the property. And you can see the driveway. It does extend to the garage at the back, which is just quite a little bit out of view in this particular photo. This is a close-up of that detached garage. The applicant with their submission did provide some draft construction drawings, and this is showing the elevation, both the front of the new building or the addition to the building, as well as from the rear. And the next drawing set is showing the elevations both from the east and west side of the site. You would note that the majority of the windows are on the west side of the proposed structure, which then looks over into the existing backyard. The number of windows proposed on the opposite side of the structure has been restricted just to one to limit and to provide privacy for the neighbor that is on that side of the property. So the subject lands are located in a settlement area being Port Elgin. It is designated primary urban community in the county official plan, and it is designated residential exception in the local official plan. The zoning on the property is residential second density. And as I already noted, the applicant had provided their construction drawings as part of their application. So when we're reviewing applications for minor variance, we do consider the 4 tests of the minor variance. So with respect to whether or not this application does maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan, as noted, the lands are designated primary urban community in the county official plan, which does permit a wide variety of uses, including residential uses. And primary urban communities are intended for more intense development, primarily the focus of residential development as well. In the local official plan, the designation is residential. The residential permits a broad range of residential uses in that designation. Previously, the local official plan only permitted additional residential units within the primary structures, but that has more recently, through a site-specific application on this property, and then the later more broad application to the municipality as a whole, that has been permitted, these units have been permitted in detached structures as well. So on that basis, the application does meet the intent of both the county and the local official plan. As it relates to the zoning on the property, it is zoned residential 2, and that permits a broad range of dwelling types, including single family, semi-detached, as well as additional residential units, or what in the bylaw up until most recently were termed as secondary dwelling units. And so the applicant is seeking to increase the height that is permitted for an accessory structure. So currently within the bylaw, the maximum height for an accessory structure is 5 meters. For the primary dwelling, it is 10 meters. And in this case, the applicant, because they are looking to put a second story above the existing garage, they are exceeding that by about 0.97 meters. That's the total height to the peak. The definition in the zoning bylaw, it varies depending on the roof type. And so the actual height based on the definition in the bylaw is likely going to be a little bit less than that, probably in the range of 5.5 meters. But for purposes of this application, we wanted to give a little bit of flexibility just to ensure that if there are any changes in the design, that is captured appropriately. So the intent of the height provisions in the bylaw are to ensure that it maintains the overall character of the area. And the neighborhood consists primarily of single detached homes, both 1 story, 2 stories in height. And in this case, with the second story addition onto the existing garage, it would be in keeping with the area, and therefore staff feel that the height variance is appropriate. As it relates to the gross area and increasing it from the bylaw permitted percentage, which is 40%, they're looking to increase it to 48%. So the existing single family home on the property has a finished floor as well as a full finished basement. And so the secondary dwelling unit is about 8% over the total gross floor area of livable space. And so the applicant is required to seek a variance for that reason. Staff feel that the 8% is minor. And again, there will be no impacts to the overall character of the neighborhood. The proposed second story is set back from the road. It will not have a visual impact to the streetscape in any way, and it is appropriately set back from adjacent neighboring properties to ensure that it provides privacy, but also allows both the occupants of this property and the neighboring properties to use their properties for their intended purpose, which is for residential reasons. And so for that reason, we do feel it is within the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. As it relates to whether or not the application is appropriate development of the land, building, or structure, we know most recently there is a desire to increase housing opportunities within the province as a whole, but more specifically with the recent amendments in the town to allow for, in areas of residential purposes, for secondary dwelling units as is proposed on this site. The applicant is looking to build this second unit for their father, and it will and has been designed to accommodate that single occupant with a single bedroom, a washroom, and a kitchen, dining, living area. And so for that reason, we do feel it is an appropriate form of development for the land. And whether or not the application is considered minor is we look at whether or not it's going to have an impact on the overall character of the neighborhood and of adjacent uses. And in this case, as already stated, we feel that it is an appropriate use of the site and will not have an impact on the neighboring properties. There will be no environmental impacts, which is also considered in this test, as well as impact to municipal services, which we've been advised have been none. As it relates to departmental and agency comments that we did receive, the town had no comments on the application, and there were no concerns expressed from Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority or the historic Saugeen Métis. And there were no public comments received in relation to this application. We did receive one inquiry today just to see whether or not there's a large maple behind the existing garage, looking to see if that tree would be retained. And I've been advised by the applicant that they are looking to remove a smaller birch just so that it doesn't interfere with the utilities that need to be run to the building. But in terms of the larger maple behind, it will be trimmed for safety purposes, but it will be retained on the property. So just to recap, there are two variances being sought in this instance to increase the height as well as the percentage of the total gross floor area, which would accommodate an additional residential unit on the property. So subject to review of this presentation and any comments that may be received, county staff are recommending that committee approve the minor variance subject to the conditions which are included on the decision sheet in your application package. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Are there any questions for the planner for the members of the committee? I can't see the rest of the committee here. Oh, there we go. Any questions? I don't believe there's any members of the public or the applicant that's present. I will now declare the public meeting to be closed. Are there any comments from the committee on this application? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve this application subject to the conditions on the decision sheet, moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt and seconded by Ms. Barwell. Any discussions, comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Our next item is item number 5.2. This is a minor variance application A-2022-053, Bradley Cole Incorporated in Kindred Financial, with the municipal address of 244 South Rankin Street in the former town of Southampton. First, we will receive a report from the planning staff. Then committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application until we have heard from the public. Then we'll hear from any members of the public. Members of the public are advised that the ability to appeal the decision on this application may be limited if you have not provided comments on the application before the decision is made. After we have heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. I now ask Ms. Smith to present the application.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Oh, it's another Ms. Smith.
Yes, two Smiths.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that okay?
It's on my screen.
Excellent. So I'm presenting application A-2022-053. The address is 244 South Rankin Street in Saugeen Shores. The applicant is proposing to reduce the parking requirements for duplex dwellings, whereas the bylaw requires 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit. The application is proposing 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Approval of the variance would facilitate the development of 4 duplex dwellings on 4 lots. The variance would result in a total of 8 off-street parking spaces instead of 16, which is the required amount. This is the site plan which illustrates the proposal. The property consists of 4 lots, and each lot will be developed with a duplex dwelling and driveway parking. I know it's a bit of a cluster on there, but you can kind of make out the dwellings and the driveways right here. In terms of the land use policies for the lots, the provincial policy statement identifies the properties as within a settlement area. The Bruce County official plan designates the property as primary urban communities. The Saugeen Shores official plan designates the property as residential, and the zoning bylaws designates the property as residential first density. The land use policies for the property permit the proposed use for residential use and as to be developed with duplex dwellings. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the photos of the site. I only have 2, but I think you can kind of get a sense of the lots and what's being built. And you can also sort of see the length of the driveway and garage. And this would be a side view of one of the lots as well. So while the minor variance application is to recognize deficient off-street parking, I will note that sufficient parking will be provided for each lot. 2 parking spaces will be provided within the driveway that comprises the lot. And then another 2 parking spaces will be provided on a portion of the driveway that is considered to be within the road allowance of Rankin Street, but this is not a driven portion of the road. So 8 parking spaces will be provided on the portion of the driveway which forms the lot fabric, and 8 spaces will be provided on a portion of the driveway that is within the road allowance. So from a technical viewpoint, 16 parking spaces will actually be provided, which meets the minimum criteria. And so for illustrative purposes, the red box is approximately the driveway, and the yellow box is where the additional parking would go, which is considered to be part of the Rankin Road right-of-way. So the Planning Act requires minor variance applications to be evaluated against 4 tests. The first test asks, does the variance maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan? Land use policies contained within both the county and local official plans permit a variety of residential land uses. The subject properties designated primary urban communities in the county official plan and residential in the Saugeen Shores official plan. And both designations are intended to provide a variety of housing forms and encourage residential growth. And the proposed development will contribute towards the town's goal of increasing housing options while maintaining the low density residential character of the neighborhood. And so the application maintains the intent and purpose of the official plans. The second test asks, does the variance maintain the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The property is zoned residential first density, and duplex dwellings are permitted in this zone. As per the zoning bylaw, parking requirements, duplex dwellings are required to have 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit. The proposed development is therefore required to provide 4 parking spaces per lot. However, South Rankin Street is currently about 100 feet wide at where the property is. And so the driveways for each of the 4 lots will be approximately 60 feet long. So while 2 parking spaces will be provided within the lot fabric, an additional 2 parking spaces will be provided on the driveway portion that is considered to be on the Rankin Street road allowance. Given that 2 parking spaces will be provided for each dwelling unit, the variance maintains the overall intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The third test asks, is the application desirable for the appropriate development of land, building, or structure? The property is intended for residential use and is located within a low-density residential area. The proposed variance will add 4 new duplex dwellings for a total of 8 residential units to the existing residential area. Therefore, the function of the lands as low-density residential will be maintained. The variance represents an appropriate form of development for the use of the land. The fourth and final test asks, is the application minor in nature? The proposed variance will not have a significant impact on the character of the area or impact the ability of neighboring property owners to use their properties for the permitted uses. And so the variance is considered to be minor. So the minor variance is being sought for technical reasons. While only 2 off-street parking spaces are proposed per lot instead of 4, sufficient parking will be provided for each dwelling unit based on the length of the driveways. Each lot will have 2 parking spaces on the lot fabric, and an additional 2 parking spaces will be provided on the road allowance, which will meet the 16 parking spaces that are required. So the variance will, in addition to providing enough parking, it therefore also meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And so for these reasons, planning staff are recommending approval of minor variance application A2022-53, and no agency or public comments have been received. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Are there any questions for the planner from the members of the committee? Deputy Mayor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Jillian, so with the proposed development, each of the units falls within the bylaws of the community, correct?
Yeah.
And there's ample space for parking between the house and the road, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, may I ask the builder a question at this point or after?
I would suggest after, when we move into, when I introduce the plant or the developer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for the planner? Seeing none, we'll now hear from the members of the public. I believe the applicant, Mr. Derek Seaman, is on the call. Mr. Seaman, do you wish to address the committee, sir?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention there, we had this application in a couple months ago before we started to divide these lots into 4, and the plan was to do 4 net zero duplexes. So these will be all 8 units will be fully net zero. So solar panels should be going up on the 2 current houses in the next month or so. So I just thought I'd mention that. So I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Mayor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, Mr. Seaman, as with your other developments, are you putting solar on these houses as well?
Yeah, just as I just mentioned, we're doing solar 10 kilowatts on each unit. So there'll be 4 10 kilowatt arrays total.
And that helps reduce, is the savings passed on to the tenants?
No, not necessarily. Indirectly through the rent, like the overall cost of the building will be less to operate. The homes will create as much power as they consume, and they'll net out to zero for utility costs. We did the one on Spence Street. It's very similar to this, and I've had it for over a year. Have 2 tenants in there, and it's worked out great. The whole system.
That's great. I think the solar application that you're using is fantastic, and I'd like to see more of that throughout the town. So thank you, and keep doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any, I believe that Mr. Willits, a member of the public, wishes to address the committee. Mr. Willits?
In there?
I couldn't hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. John Willits here. Local properties that I own include 2 homes on South Rankin. One is a single family home, 3-bedroom rental, as well as an 8-plex on Albert Street. My wife and I provide affordable rental housing for up to 18 individuals. One more here. These are good quality homes, ones that you'd like would be happy for your mother or your sister to live in. I was surprised that the appropriate parking wasn't addressed in the original variance that was presented to this committee some months ago. From looking at the drawings in the presentation that we just received, it looks like we're going to have for each one of the units, so we're talking about 16 cars on a lot, we'll have two and two, four deep. Now, South Rankin is a defined neighborhood. It's low density, and this is what came up in the presentation already, low density residential, single family homes on very large lots. Having a large lot housing modality choice is what the people who have come to live in this community were seeking. It wasn't a matter of a house that required a septic system or anything like that. When you look at the official plan map, it also, in the presentation, you notice it's also provided a good example of the houses, the very large lots in the neighborhood. And I respectfully have a slightly different point of view on the analysis that was presented to you in the 4 criteria. Do the variances maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan? The plan is to maintain the character of established residential areas and to maintain the neighborhood's low density residential character. You're going to have 8 families in a neighborhood of single family dwellings. The housing footprint per family is only a fraction of what the rest of the neighborhood is. Second question came up, it says the variance to maintain the intended purpose. The parking bylaws are there to ensure the safe movement of people and sufficient off-street parking that's required. And it says it is required. The zoning bylaws for duplexes are required to provide 2 offset park per dwelling per unit. We have 4 buildings, 8 units, 16 cars. If anyone's ever had a teenager in their home, you know, it's probably going to be more than 2 cars per family. It goes on in the report. It says, therefore, the proposal meets for parking permits for the proposed maintained intent of the zoning bylaws. And if you've ever lived with a car with double stacked parking like that, as you do when you have teenagers and things, inevitably the cars end up on the street. Is it appropriate is the application desirable for the appropriate development of building and structure? You're adding a total of 8 dwelling units to a housing stack to create opportunities for home ownership. The function of the lands, low-density residential will maintain and should be a variable approved. Respectfully, rental units, up and down duplexes particularly, do not create, or there certainly could be an argument that wouldn't create additional home ownership opportunities, but create further rentals. Unless they're extremely affordable, respectfully, the market rates don't allow a lot of that to happen. And lastly, the 18 cars on the corner of Division Street in South Rankin may represent a sightline problem, particularly considering the line of 70 to 80-year-old cedar trees that line Division Street into South Rankin, and I suppose those could get cut down. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. I'm unaware of any written submissions and so forth. Do any committee members have final questions before we close the public meeting and discuss the application? Seeing none, I now declare the public meeting to be closed. Are there any comments from the committee on this application? Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt.
Yeah, just really comments, Mr. Chair, and I did take a look at the that area being zoned as residential first density R1, and I read the permitted residential uses do include semi-detached dwellings, duplex dwellings, et cetera, and I happen to believe there's a real need in this community for mixed housing, and so the duplexes to me seem to fit. And I think it's a good development for Saugeen Shores. And if you take a look at our zoning, again, R1 residential, R1 first density, it seems to meet that criteria. Derek, Mr. Seaman, I'm just wondering, I'm just more of a curiosity question around pricing, but this type of housing is needed in Saugeen Shores. And any ballpark figure what these units would sell for?
In terms of rent, do you mean, sorry?
Or rental, I should say.
Yeah, we haven't set the rent yet. So I have a business partner with this, Kindred Financial, so we haven't set it yet, but I'm assuming the rent will probably be around $2,500 to $3,000 a month, something like that. That would be for the upper unit. The lower one will rent for a little less. I haven't exactly set it yet, but probably in that.
That 2,500 is 3-bedroom, correct?
Yes. And that would be all included. With the solar there, we provide Wi-Fi and all the utilities. That's their only bill.
So that's all encompassing, eh? So
yeah.
Was there any ever consideration for that lot for secondary dwelling suites sold, Derek?
You mean like the same like we did on Spence Street? Yeah, we did consider that at one point when the town decided to change the zoning to allow duplexes. We thought that was a better system for us to go with to provide more bedrooms.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Derek.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve this application subject to the conditions on the decision sheet?
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Our next meeting will be on, to be confirmed, will be on Monday, September the 19th, 2022. I have a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Matheson and seconded by Ms. Barwell, and all in favor. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.